Hey folks, so I wanted to record a little message here about this election because it seems like our generation isn't turning out to vote as was the plan. The whole premise of the Sanders campaign was that we're going to expand the electorate and get people who usually don't vote because they see the whole process is corrupt to vote on the premise that, hey, we're not corrupt and this is something different. um, but people aren't turning out to vote. And um, as a member of this, I don't know, halfway depoliticized counterculture myself, I feel like I feel I feel an obligation to try to speak to us, we who see how corrupt this whole fucking thing is, and want to see something different, but feel like it's impossible through the mechanisms that they've given to us electorally. Um, this may be our last chance, y'all. Like Bernie might be our last chance to you know, deal with these problems in a like I don't know reasonable manner. Like people talk about Bernie being a radical, but he's really not. Like compared to the other radical solutions that are out there to this situation of you know capitalists killing us all through their industrial pollution and whatnot. Like the I don't know. It's sorry. Let me back up. So I've had to go through. I've this has been an interesting week for me because I'm 2016 fucked me up. Well, let me back up even further. 2013, 2014, the time when Joe Biden is running his campaign right now on going back to in like 2013, 2014, like America, the state of America was so dismal that I assume many other Americans were feeling suicidal just based off the prospects of what was being being you know offered to the population through politics. And it's like if Obama was seen as some kind of leftist, that I think that was the thing that made me like hopeless for society. Is I was like, okay, if Obama is is the furthest left that you could get, and he's still wants to do wars and deportations and bank bailouts and all this evil capitalist shit, I was like, okay, well then we're just completely fucked, and there's no way, everything to the left. If everything to the left of that is a political non-starter, then we're never going to get anywhere. So I was very, 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 I went through a very pessimistic phase during the Obama administration because of that. And the Bernie Sanders campaign has I don't know, showed that there's space to the left. There's space to the left of the Democratic Party, and we're watching it play out right now. What the Democratic Party is throwing the election right now by doing everything it can to suppress the base, the Sanders movement, the millennials who comprehend what the fuck's going on and see Bernie's solutions as the only thing even approximating something like a an appropriate response to the degeneration of our society and our um, ecosystem. And we are being active, even as we learned the rules of the game in 2016 of okay, here's how we got to battle with the establishment, and then now we're doing it, and it's they're pulling out all the same shit that the Republicans been using to disenfranchise people for my whole life that I've been watching this political system play out. So it's it's abundant more clear to me, it's more clear now than ever that the Democratic Party's main function is to prevent the left from having a vehicle in politics. And the extent to which the Democratic Party is trying to silence its own base, its own enthusiastic base, they're trying to do that. They're like, that's their number one priority, is to stop Bernie Sanders. Like, they could care less, as far as I can tell, about beating Donald Trump. Like, they pretend to fucking want to get Trump out of there. Obviously, the average Democratic voter, when I'm driving in San Francisco, like all my passengers, you know, they're all just like, oh, we just got to get Trump out of there, you know, like anything but Trump, you know, anything, we just got to get him out of there. And I'm like, well, but what about if the Democrats nominate somebody who's even worse than Trump? Are you? And they're like, nope, we just got to get Trump out of there. It's like people can't wrap their head around the fact that something could be worse than what Donald Trump is doing. It's like, even Michael Bloomberg, dude, like it's like, yeah, the prospects of a Bloomberg administration are so horrifying that the number of Democrats that were like, oh yeah, I would even take that over Trump, made me feel like, wow, this party they are like children. Like, in a, like, and like getting, and like they feel like they're on you know, they've been on timeout or something, and they're like, oh no, I'll do anything to get out of this timeout, and they feel like that's what, and it's like, but maybe this fake, you know, liberal order that, you know, pretended to care about Black people and poor people and women and queer people, and maybe all that was just a ruse. I feel like people are finally, you know, people are seeing that that all of that was just like, you know, a way to distract from the ongoing robbery that both parties have been a part of and teaming up on us to perpetuate. And so, I mean, and people see it, like, that's why people don't vote. And so, damn, I guess I forgot that the point of this video was to say, was a plea to us to vote. But like, you know, it's an interesting thing because I'll never tell anybody to vote for somebody shitty. You know, I know that there are so many good candidates out there. There's this grassroots left populist uprising happening right now. And the extent to which the Democratic Party, every aspect of the Democratic Party is like, okay, so for the past decade or whatever, the big thing is like, oh, that the Democrats are weak and spineless. Or maybe I shouldn't say the past decade. My entire life, I've been hearing about how the Democrats are spineless and they, you know, they're weak fighting against the Republicans. And that's true. That's very true. They're unbelievably spineless when it comes to trying to stand up against the Republicans, for sure. But then over the past 5 years, what we've seen that they can fight. We've seen that when the left actually presents itself and is like, oh, hey, we got millions of people here that are like trying to get economic justice, we see that the Democratic Party is capable of fighting, you know, in a way that I've literally never seen Nancy Pelosi fight as hard as she has against the left in the past 5 years. Just especially think about Nancy Pelosi battling with AOC. Like, Nancy Pelosi's been just the Democrats just give the Republicans everything they want. They gave him 40, you know, his billions of dollars for the border wall, the Patriot Act, the defense budgets. They'll give them everything, you know, like the Democrats just lay down, you know, and like, and it's constantly like through the Obama administration, it was like, oh yeah, he was trying to capitulate to the Republicans, so get them to compromise with him. It's like, even though that never happened, over and over and over and over again, Obama just kept being like, oh yeah, well, maybe if we capitulate to them again, to the Republicans again this time, then maybe Mitch McConnell will work with us. So it's just like this pathetic display of like, cowering in the face of opposition. But then Bernie Sanders comes along and it's like, oh, wait, they can marshal everything that they've got against the left to squash this movement. Like, so anyways, Super Tuesday's gone. So all of us Californians, we've had our say. But going forward, I have a lot of friends in Washington and Colorado and these other states that, I want to implore you, please, we're right. This race is tied. This race is tied right now. Like we could still win this thing. Like they're still going to try to cheat us. They're still going to try to steal it from us in July, but it'll be a lot harder for them to do that if, enough of us have joined in with this movement, because obviously there's a lot of voter suppression going on, but there is a turnout problem going on too. And I can see it, going door to door. People don't even know there's a fucking election going on right now. But there's, our generation has to care, we have to care. The people who are running this shit are not going to be around for much longer. They're not going to have to watch the whole thing collapse in the same way that we are. We're going to be alive in 20, 30, 40 years to watch this whole thing either ascend to a new height or completely collapse and fall into unimaginable civil unrest. And it's like, I don't think that, I'm part of my frustration is that I'm almost as cynical as anybody I know, but I don't believe that lends itself to this feeling like I don't know, it's hopeless or that we should give up. It's like, it's not the case that how do I put this? It's like, yeah, we don't live in a democracy to the same extent that we're taught that we do in school, but there are still democratic mechanisms in place that the powerful manipulate to keep themselves in power. But those mechanisms of democracy do exist, and they're not completely worthless. It's just that they've been, well, at least in the past 50 years. I didn't mean for this to be a long video, but to give a short version of it. Only property owning white males could vote at the beginning of when this thing was founded. That was only 6% of the population. And then they removed the property requirement, so the poor white guys could vote. And then women's suffrage. And then, first the 14th Amendment, but then they still had poll taxes and Jim Crow and all that. But so we expanded the electorate, the people who were allowed to participate at all, to include almost everybody besides immigrants and felons. And so then in the 60s, because everybody was like, hey, blah, blah, that story. But then they legalized bribery in 1976. It's a long story I go into in my book. But so then they legalized bribery in 1976 as a way to be like, oh, okay, there's too many people vote. Everybody has access to voting now, so we got to put more. We got to go into overdrive, propagandizing the population to make sure, or and the political process itself, so that every politician has to spend all their time fundraising and begging rich people for money and offering favors to capitalists to whatever, to get quote unquote get things done, as they all say. But they don't want you to ask what are the things that they're getting done, because they're pretty much all bad things. up until this point, because they don't work for us. They don't work for the people. They work for billionaires. They work for capitalists. They work for industry. That's how this system works. And we were starting to get to a point of challenging it. And then that was what, the whole civil rights movement and the counterculture was like putting all this pressure on the system. It's like, hey. So you guys said you gave us that this is a democracy, right? Well, we want X, Y, and Z. Because if our voices are to be respected, then here are our demands. And then the political elite were like, oh, okay, yeah, let's, sorry, but we just can't win that way. We have to do this other quote unquote pragmatic shit where we don't actually go anywhere. We actually can only go backwards. All this 20th century, welfareism, we're gonna have to fucking go backwards to the 19th century where we just let rich people run the shit and poor people could die in the streets. Thanks, Bill. But anyways, so then the Republicans ran the table because they were the ones that were more business friendly, and then until Bill Clinton came along and was like, hey, we the Democratic Party, we can be just as corrupt and pro-business as the Republicans. And so then they have been. So, I was born in 1990, so literally my entire life, the Democratic Party has been almost indistinguishable from the Republican Party other than not hating gay people. And that's questionable given that their Democratic Party didn't even legalize gay marriage until 5 years ago. but it's, and maybe they're slightly less racist, but not that much. So I completely understand that most people who of my generation think that that politics is a complete waste of time, and both sides are the same, and it doesn't matter who gets elected because they're just going to do the same thing. And to a large extent, they're right. I don't have I don't have much of an objection to that observation. But what I have an objection to is lumping in this new thing, Bernie Sanders, and this populist left movement of democratic socialism, where people are just like, no, this system is not good enough. But this all this corruption and this terribleness that the two sides have been working together on. Damn it, I wish I had gone live with this. But anyways, like that whole system is we are not a part of that. The Bernie Sanders movement is not a part of that. And so the extent to which my peers don't vote is a well, it's definitely a product of it's definitely a product of what the Democratic Party has done to be so uninspirational and corrupt as to disenfranchise people by their own volition. People are just like, oh yeah, I get that it's nice that I can vote, but I'm going to choose not to. Just because both the system's so corrupt. And I got a message for you. That's what they want. They want us to disengage. They don't want us involved. They never wanted anybody voting in the first place. The people who are running this country never wanted any of us voting in the first place. Like this whole shit was set up for only capitalists to get to vote amongst each other. Like rich white capitalists to get to vote amongst each other. And then they made it look like there were other things going on, but all the while they were countervailing the progress that was being made on paper. So anyways, that's why this election is so stark, like we couldn't have a more clear juxtaposition of, that corrupt Democratic establishment that's just going to run shit like they always ran shit, and this new thing, this new grassroots movement of people, working people, getting involved in the political process and standing up for their own dignity that has been trampled on by both parties for 40 years. And Bernie's been there throughout those whole 40 years, being like, hey, maybe we should do something different than that. But then, obviously that's why the Democratic Party has hated him. That's why the Democratic Party, he's been like a thorn in their side for 40 years, while the Democratic Party has been, going down this path of corruption for the past 40 years. Bernie Sanders has been there all along to be like, fuck you guys. No, this is terrible. That's why everybody always says, Bernie's not a Democrat. Because a Democrat, in that sense, in that old traditional sense, means a politician who sells out workers while pretending to represent them, but actually represents the bosses, just like the other party. And so then that whole entire way of doing politics is toxic. It's caustic to the democratic spirit of a society. Like democracy isn't just a form of government, it's a way of life. And the extent to, and Joe Biden represents everything about the Democratic Party that has been eroding the democratic nature of our society by saying fuck you people. like Joe Biden said, like that, young people are complaining about, their lack of economic prospects, and he has, quote unquote, no, he says, give me a break, I have no empathy. So it's like, so that's why I'm like, fuck Joe Biden. Do not vote for Joe Biden ever. Like, you'll never hear me or like anybody who really thinks long term about this country and where democracy is going, the evolution of civilization. Like, fuck Joe Biden. Even in November, like if they fucking steal this nomination from us in July, then the Democrat, then we have to start seriously considering that the Democratic Party is not going to be the vehicle for any of this change that we need. We have to abandon the party if they steal it from us again, which they're in the process of doing. So this past week, this has been an emotional week for me. Like going from, because I always knew that this was a possibility, and I swear, and I do not mean to sound defeatist, and if you're in a state that hasn't voted yet, please I'm begging you to still vote, and I'm begging you to still knock on doors and tell all your friends to vote. And it's so important. But like, I'm psychologically already, just the way that South Carolina endorsement, the Clyburn endorsement, is like boosted. Like half of the voters in South Carolina said that the Clyburn endorsement is the reason that they voted for Joe, and they just made up their mind in the past week. That's half of the fucking voters. And so I was like, oh, whoa, if the Democratic electorate is that fluid, that's not looking good. And then Super Tuesday happened, and then Pete dropped out and Amy dropped out, and the establishment was like, hey, Pete and Amy, you got to get out of here. This is a Joe show now. And they all did. And all the fucking sheep in the Democratic Party were like, all right, I guess we're going to vote for Joe now. And then he dominated on Super Tuesday. And so that's what has caused me to do a lot of reckoning with that now. Because this whole past year, after seeing what we saw in 2016, and watching politics really, really closely over the last 5 years, like, I didn't have a lot of hope for this thing, necessarily. Like, I never allowed myself to get, completely emotionally invested in it in quite the same way that I did in 2016. That shit fucked me up. Like, Hillary Clinton's numbers were dropping every time she would be in public, and and Bernie was like rising like crazy because he had no name recognition and all that. And I was like, oh, we're really gonna do it. And they just they fucking rigged the election. They closed polling places and blah blah blah, and like purged people from the voter rolls and all this shit. And I was just like, oh, okay, so this is how they're gonna play it. And so then, but then the way that the way Bernie was, playing nice with the DNC over the past 5 years, I thought, oh, I thought that was a tactful thing, that, that he was like legitimately going to get reform in the DNC, as to which they would, or, whereby they would be less, able, if not still willing, um, or, yeah, to rig it and to steal it from us, and they're doing it again. And so this time I'm like, I don't know. So I have a much different, like, I like, literally, like, the majority of my friends never thought that there was any reason to suspect that they would ever let Bernie win. And, like, so then they didn't fucking vote for him. I don't know. Sorry. That was just like, I get it. And that's why I'm like, I have no patience for the Hillary people telling me my vote for Jill Stein gave us Trump. And so there's a similar, I understand there's a similar dynamic going on here, where I don't want to go telling the non-voters that they gave us Biden, even though that's true, even though there's a lot, that's definitely a big factor. But we got to vote, you guys. Like, we have to care. We have to, like, I understand not wanting to get emotionally invested in it, on the expectation that they're gonna steal it again. But that's not a reason not to care. That's not a reason not to vote. We have to really get animated about this, because this is the future of life on Earth that we're talking about. If the ecosystem collapses, it's not even just humanity that's fucked. You know what I mean? Like, it's all of us. 200 species going extinct every day, and like, and so they don't care, if it's Trump or Biden doing it. They're dying anyways. The capitalists are doing it, and so I guess I should say they don't care whether there's a Democrat or a Republican in office as they go extinct and hollow out the support base for human life. It doesn't matter what party's in charge. Voting blue, no matter who, is not going to save the planet. Far from it. In fact, it's only going to is only going to make it less obvious that it's dying. Rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic is only going to trick people into thinking that it's not sinking. Not to mention Joe Biden, even if Joe Biden were mentally competent enough to win or be president, his record is atrocious. Everything Joe Biden has done in office while he was mentally competent enough to be in office has been the most corrupt, awful, evil shit that the government does. Mass incarceration, the wars, the bankruptcy bill, all of the worst shit that the government does. Joe Biden had a direct hand in authoring that legislation. He was the guy, he has, as he always says, I was the guy who blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you were the guy who helped the Republicans do every corrupt thing they ever wanted to do. Like, Bill Clinton and Joe Biden were working hand in hand in the 90s with Newt Gingrich and the fucking radical Republicans who are gutting these social welfare programs and amplifying the prison population. That was a bipartisan effort. And Joe Biden was right there. And Bernie Sanders was an independent in Congress, like, as I said, all along the way saying, fuck both of you guys. And, you know, unfortunately, the Bernie faction of the country had been without a voice until 2015, when every progressive in the country um, was intimidated out of running against Hillary, because the Clinton machine literally threatened the careers, and I would imagine lives, of everybody who might have thought about challenging her. So that's why Elizabeth Warren was a coward and wouldn't do it. And then when it came time to, and then so Bernie was like, all right, well, if nobody's going to challenge this, you know, neoliberal corporatist warmonger, then if really nobody's going to do it, I guess I'll do it. And so then that's where this Bernie Sanders movement is from him being like, all right, well, if seriously nobody else will oppose her, then I can't in good conscience just let her run away with this thing. And mounted this campaign, and the internet just happened to be mature enough at that point to develop this meme ecosystem that could even begin to counteract the corporate media ecosystem that the Clinton machine had in its pocket. And so that's why we even were in the ball game, and we've won. We had more fucking delegates, dude. We got the nomination was just stolen from us. But anyways, so I don't know. I guess I got to wrap this video up, and I swear I didn't mean for this to be a long diatribe, but I guess I just wanted to say we have to care about this. Like, there's no, oh yeah, shit is just fucked up, and I guess it's just gonna get more fucked up until, you know, either we go extinct or somebody fixes it. It's like, wait, but no, this is the thing. This is the time when we have to start fucking caring about it. If we're gonna not go extinct, now is the time we have to fucking start working on that. Like, actively trying to avoid it, because it's right there staring us in the face. Like, the Democrats are always like, oh, well, we might, the normie Dems are always like, oh, our democracy is threatened by 4 more years of Trump. It's like, oh, well, but actually our fucking species is threatened by any more years of neoliberalism, which is really what Trump is continuing. It's like it's neo-fascist in rhetoric, but I mean, the neo-fascist project and the neoliberal project are not that far off. They're cousins. They're not the enemies that they pretend to be on television. like Bill Clinton and Rudy Giuliani and Michael Bloomberg and Donald Trump, they're all fucking buddies. You know, they've been going to the same cocktail parties, golfing together. They're homies. This is the ruling class we're talking about. Like, they don't give a fuck about which parties, it's just a matter of like which the parties to them traditionally have been, okay, which one of us can trick more of the peasants into voting for us, because neither of us are working in their best interests. And the internet is now being like, hey, actually, we peasants, we want to fucking have a say in this now. Like, y'all are about to kill all of us if we let you run this thing any longer, we don't get to have a conversation about whether or not it's appropriate to have transgender bathrooms or whatever. If the whole fucking species is going extinct, if there's tornadoes and floods and hurricanes and fires, like and pandemics, and like all these like super scary biological catastrophes, like, if we're not going to be able to coherently or intelligently deal with any of that shit if we the people don't start getting involved in caring about what the fuck is, if we the people don't start getting involved and in caring about who is making the decisions, who is running this shit. We need a more sophisticated analysis rather than, oh yeah, it's just all fucked. People need to start thinking more critically about, okay, how is it fucked and why and how do we get around that? Like we can't just give up. I've come across I have too many conversations with people who get it that this shit is corrupt, but they're just like, yeah, well, but it's unsolvable. I mean, and that's the point. I mean, my book is definitely my book is definitely a sorry, my cat's running around here. My book is definitely is largely a response to that feeling of like, oh well, you know, it's just this a general impression that the whole entire system is so corrupt that it's not worth even bothering to try to fix, because you know it quote unquote always has been this way and quote unquote always will be. But that's not true. That's how they want you to think it is. That's specifically how they maintain the status quo, and how they've been maintaining the status quo since the beginning of fucking civilization. Everything is, God set it up like this. You can't change it. You know, God set it up like this because God wanted it to be like this. And if you got another, you know, idea, then you could take that up with God. For thousands of fucking years. And it's just in the last couple hundred years that we had you know, even the fantasy of a democracy, and it wasn't real even then, and it still isn't real. And so democracy itself is a utopian fantasy. It's a utopian idea that cannot be actually realized, but can only be approximated. You know, like the people, you know, aren't conscious enough to, you know, make all the decisions that are being made on their behalf anyways. It's just not possible. But we're in this moment where we have to make a huge leap in the amount of democratic input that we're putting in to this system, because unabated, you know, if we allow this system to continue to just operate according to its own plans, then yeah, we'll go extinct. And we'll deserve to. But I think we're better than that. I legitimately think humanity is better than that. So and that includes politics. That includes like our generation like has to make that step from acknowledging it's all corrupt and working for the bad guys to getting involved and taking that over. You know, we have to get involved in, and I mean, and there's still a debate, a lively debate going on right now as to whether that ought to happen inside the Democratic Party or outside of it. But the way this thing is going, and we'll see these next couple months, these next few months will determine once and for all whether this needs to happen inside or outside the Democratic Party. Like, it's sad to see. It's sad to see a party with democracy in its name, you know, abandon democracy when the you know, when the demos tries to crassy. But you know, it's like, you know, that's a nice brand you got there, Democratic Party, you know, like but sounds like false advertising to me. But anyways, so this video, I guess I'll wrap it up. I'll try to wrap this up by saying I don't apologize to anyone who I encouraged to care about this election. If you are now heartbroken and enraged by what's going on in a way that you might not have otherwise been, or to the degree, or to a degree that you might not have otherwise been because of me, good. And I also in advance don't apologize for not voting for Joe Biden, no matter what. Fuck this party if they steal this nomination from us again. But you should care about it. Every millennial out there, every dejected, dreamer out there who believes in a better future, in a better world, in a better country, in a better party. I love you, and we need something better than this, and you should care to help create whatever this thing is that's better than it. Because like DSA is a big factor in that. I think DSA is going to be huge. It's been really inspirational to me to see, the organizing that they're doing, and outside of the Democratic Party, because it's just like, oh yeah, okay, I guess this party is not even just not helpful. It is detrimental to the project of democracy, to the project of creating a better world and a better country. This Democratic Party is not on our side. I used to think they were on our side more than the Republicans were, but now I don't even know. Now I feel like the Democratic Party is just as bad. I feel like this has made it more clear to me than ever that the function of the Democratic Party is not to fight the Republicans. The function of the Democratic Party is to keep the peasants, the left peasants, in line and not involved, to get us to, accept the Hillary Clintons and the Joe Bidens of the world and call that a democracy, and call that a Democratic Party. But we can't allow them to call this that anymore. It's like I don't know. I don't know, man. Get involved. Yeah, I guess the best advice I could end this video on is hit up your local DSA chapter and see what they're doing. I feel like we have to care. We have to get involved, and the Democratic Party is not it. But love you guys. Till next time.